name is Joshua Newman. This is my final exam for Biology 101, and I will be summarizing Chapter 1, The Nature of Science and the Characteristics of Life. My first question would be, what is biology? And biology is the study of scientific life. The hierarchy of life, all living things from different backgrounds being related to certain characteristics that interlink them. So you have plants, animals, and humans. We each have certain characteristics that interlink us, whether we be consumers and producers, and we each have cells and organisms that grow and expand and things of that nature. To study biology, one must view the world in a particular way. The use of scientific thinking allows for scientists to think logically and objectively when valuing evidence and discovering truth. When discovering truth, scientists use the knowledge of scientific thinking to study a phenomenon which requires a process of science. That process requires the scientific method. The scientific method has 4 steps. The first step being making observations. The second step would be to create a hypothesis that explains your observation. The third step would be to generate predictions from your hypothesis. And the fourth step is to test those hypotheses. You want to test your hypothesis multiple times to increase the validity of your work. A hypothesis cannot be proven true. A hypothesis can either be upheld or not. If your hypothesis is not upheld, it can be later modified, which means you can basically change some of your processes, change some of the things that you did within your scientific method to increase the validity of your observation. And also within the scientific method, you have independent variables and you also have the dependent variable. The independent variable is always manipulated. The dependent variable is the respondent of the changes in the independent variable. There are multiple types of experimental designs within when creating a scientific scientific method. Most notably, you have the controlled experiment. In controlled experiments, the researcher measures the value of the dependent variable for 2 groups. Groups must be similar. So, for example, if you're studying a certain species of animal, you want the animals to be similar. Insects, plants, you want them to all be similar. The groups must be exposed to change. Well, one group must be exposed to change in the independent variable, while the other is not exposed to change. So you have one group of animals that is exposed to a certain type of food that you want to test. The other group cannot be exposed to that same food. When completing this experiment, there are also a multitude of other experiments. You have the single blind experiment, you also have the double blind experiment. Within the single blind experiment, that experiment avoids the placebo effect. And within the placebo effect, participants believe they feel better because they have been treated. That causes friction within your study. Next, you would have the to have scientific fact, you must be able to replicate your observations. So like before, for scientific theory to be valid, it must be supported by multiple observations and experiments. So from there, we would go on to what are living organisms. What is a living organism? Plants, animals, and humans would be the elementary answer to what a living organism is. The key characteristics of a living organism are: 1, it has to be made of cells. 2, it can reproduce and create offspring. 3, take energy, consume food and water. 4, adapt to their environment. And 5, maintain internal conditions. and lastly, 6, which would be evolve as a group. Cells are the building block of living things. Sexual reproduction brings new life. So there was the female who has the eggs, and there's the male who has the sperm. Together, a single cell is created once they are fertilized. That single cell is called a zygote. That later expands into multiple cells. And then you go on and you have DNA, which is genetic codes that are passed. And the genetic code spells out the structure and function and behavior that is passed on from the parents to the organism. You have your metabolism. Metabolism is the stored energy by an organism. So once consumed, it's that energy that comes from what you consumed. Biological evolution is the overall change in genetics of a species. You also have adaptive traits that are used to survive and reproduce in an environment. And lastly, you would have your natural selection. Natural selection is key in the evolution of mechanisms. Natural selection molds a population of species best suited for that environment. And now we kind of roll back around into the biological hierarchies. Biological hierarchies consist of atoms, molecules, cells, tissue, organs, organ systems, individuals, population, communities, ecosystem, biome, and biosphere. And with all those, these are all things that can be studied at different levels of science. So, in conclusion, there are multiple things that Chapter 1 explained, and it basically gives a synopsis of what biology is and the hierarchies that affect each thing, whether you're